Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, March 12th. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we don't see a whole lot going on. A little bit of low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska generating 18-foot seas, but aimed at Alaska, not at the U.S. West Coast. And some sort of low pressure just west of the date line, not creating any seas of interest. Let's get into the details. We'll start our tour this week looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for troughs in the jet. We certainly don't see it. In fact, we see a rather kind of strange jet stream pattern. Yes, it's consolidated, pushing off Japan, running flat to the east. Not very strong, little pocket of 190 knot winds here, just east of the date line. Then the jet stream splits, with part of it moving over Baja, the other part up into British Columbia. But there's this large cut off upper level low sitting over the Bering Sea, and suspicion is it's still somehow stealing winds, probably somewhere around over here, stealing it from the jet, promoting the circulation, and just not allowing the jet to be particularly robust. The other part here is this split here, again, kind of limits gale formation. You know, what we really want, between the split jet stream flows, you typically get high pressure, and we'll see that that is, in fact, the case off California. And with this upper level low here, there is just no room for a trough to form, or even if it were to form, to get any real gale formation going, because the upper level trough would steal all the energy from the developing surface low. So that's kind of the setup. We'll put this into motion. We see that upper level low continues into Tuesday. We'll roll this out into Wednesday, and then things start getting a little bit interesting. The upper level low starts merging with the main jet, pushing into the Pacific Northwest and actually falling south a little. Also, winds start building off Japan. Now, to the, what is that? Oh, maybe 150, 160 knot range. Now, no real troughs are setting up, but maybe one could guess that a weak trough would be here. That is a dip in the jet, falling sort of south and then north, and that would promote a counterclockwise flow there, and that's aloft, but then also down at the surface counterclockwise would circulation would form, and that, of course, is the hallmark of low pressure. Low pressure, of course, generates winds. Winds generate seas, and seas, when they radiate away from the fetch area, produce swell, and when that swell impacts your beach, creates surf. Anyway, rolling out, we see as we get into Thursday, a trough gets a little bit better defined, a little bit of a split trying to organize here over the date line. And yeah, it kind of does it, but really what you see is kind of this backwards hook here. And that is, again, a form of a trough, not a super deep, well-organized trough, but it's being fed by 160 knot winds, and things being what they have been lately, anything that looks like a trough is good news. Also, you kind of get this kind of a split going on here northeast of Hawaii, but then the jet consolidates, but it's all focused on the Pacific Northwest, so that would tend to preclude moisture moving into California. You see there, high pressure ridge developing. So again, we talk about troughs, dips in the jet making low pressure, a change, a ridge, a push to the north in the jet by the same token in the northern hemisphere promotes clockwise circulation, which is high pressure, and of course that does not a whole lot for swell production. Anyway, but we're into Friday, sort of a trough developing the West Pacific. Notice the split is moving east here. It's east of Hawaii at this point just off the California coast. The jet kind of weak, not particularly strong. What is that, 150 knot winds, but it's consolidated, pushing almost the whole way across the Pacific into Sunday. And there we are, late Sunday night, a reasonably decent jet stream flow with something that resembles a trough and sort of a little upper level low pressure or dip here in the height of the atmosphere, promoting low pressure. Not a whole lot pushing into California yet, but the thought is that maybe better things are coming in the future. Let's look at the surface. So here we go, surface level pressure, surface level winds, and as expected, weak low pressure here in the Gulf of Alaska, a little fetch of 30 knot winds, not really aimed at our forecast area. High pressure off of California, keeping things high and dry. A much needed break after 2 months solid of almost non-stop rain and downpours, so a little bit of a break, allowing the snowpack to stabilize in higher elevations. And actually warm, push temperatures at Squaw Valley, I believe, were in the upper 50s at some point today. So a little bit of snow melt going on. Also low pressure here in the West Pacific, making 25 knot northwest winds, not doing a whole lot for swell production. Anyway, roll into Monday. Much the same goes on, and it's really when you get into Wednesday that notice low pressure starting to develop off Japan. Pretty strong here, 55 knot winds aimed due north, but the fetch aimed at Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast is 40 knots in tiny little patches. That system starts moving to the west with 40, 45 knot winds, getting pretty organized and then lifting north here. What is that, about a 984, 80, 76, 972, 970 millibar low, and 35 knot winds. That's getting traction on the ocean surface. Also low pressure here developing off California by Friday. That certainly is suggestive of a change in pattern. This system continues into Saturday, so this is a long-lasting system, not particularly strong, 35 knot winds. The low pushes in up northeast into Oregon, probably bypassing California. High pressure still barely trying to hang on. Winds continue Saturday into Sunday here off of the Kuril Islands, and another little low pressure. It looks like things are trying to organize, but just not quite there yet. But still, looks like potential for swell production in the West Pacific. Let's go take a look at the wave model chart. And here we go, significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. Same view, same setup that we saw earlier in the presentation. Things continue on. We're looking for low pressure to develop off of Japan on Wednesday. That's the only hope. And there you go. We start with little area 34, 35 foot seas pushing towards Hawaii. Kind of backs off a little bit into Thursday, but then Friday reorganizes with 25 foot seas closer to Hawaii, aimed pretty well at the islands and somewhat at the U.S. West Coast, though a long distance away. Whatever swell will be generated be well decayed. Roll this out, and it just continues with more 23, 24 foot seas into Saturday. I mean, this is kind of a long-lasting system. And then here we are. We're out. Whoops, there we are. 180 hours. Things start fading out, but certainly there's like 3 to 4 days almost of seas in the West Pacific. Certainly good for rideable swell for Hawaii. And some of that energy, as we said, will reach California, but nothing huge in size, but something rideable. And while we're at it, we're going to take a quick look at the southern hemi as well. It seems a little bit early and premature to be looking here, but sure enough, and we're looking back in time. So this is Thursday night of last week, the 10th of March. Low pressure developing south-southeast of New Zealand. Got a quick burst of 50 knot winds and 40 foot seas, really pretty much 39 feet. Pretty much bypassing Hawaii. Maybe good for Peru, Central America, maybe something into, and then it lasted into Saturday and then faded pretty quickly. But maybe good for something relative for Central America. And now looking, starting today, 18Z Sunday, that's about 10 a.m. Sunday. Continuing to look, and there is low pressure forecast to develop, a gale actually, in the very far southeast Pacific. With seas building, it's really Tuesday night, 30-foot seas aimed pretty much to the north. And if you look at the fetch pattern here, it is basically south winds. So though it doesn't look like it so much in the wave model chart. So energy, this is on the very edge of the Southern California swell window, probably targeting Mexico a little bit better. And then by Wednesday, 37-foot seas, but pretty much out of the Southern California swell window. So maybe a little bit there. 117 west is Southern California, the San Diego area, let's say. So some energy there, but mainly, again, Mexico, Central America. And then there's another system forecast under New Zealand come Friday. Just barely 30-foot seas, probably not any significantly rideable swell from that. And then some more forecast a week out, but none of that's believable. The point being mainly, the southern hemi appears to be trying to come online weekly, but coming online nonetheless. And given that the North Pacific, for the most part, is not super productive, any energy, swell energy from any source is welcome. Let's look longer term, specifically at the Madden-Julian oscillation and the El Niño southern oscillation. As usual, we like to look at winds in the Kelvin wave generation area. That is on the equator. Here's the date line here. East Pacific here, West Pacific here, New Guinea there. And we notice we have strong trades, normal actual trades, blowing the whole way across the equatorial Pacific. But it's this area from 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, over to about 135 east, right in here. This is the area where we look at for generating Kelvin waves if you were in an El Nino year, but also this is a good area for monitoring the state of the Madden-Julian oscillation. The MJO, as we've talked about before, is this periodic, it's a cycle that lasts about 2 or 3 weeks. It develops in the West Pacific, traverses the width of the Pacific in an active state. When it's active, it tends to either suppress trades in the Kelvin wave generation area or even reverse them. If they're strong enough, that can create a Kelvin wave. And in the inactive phase, sort of the opposite of it, it enhances trades in this area. Now, when trades are suppressed or reversed, that tends to really feed the jet stream, and when trades are enhanced, it tends to really knock the jet stream down. Right now, we're in the inactive phase of the MJO. It's over here in the dateline region, and we'll get into that in a minute. Trades are blowing good. Here's anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year, and as expected, trades, these are from the east, stronger than normal easterly trades. That's what's kind of chopping the energy out of the jet stream and kind of really put a damper on both swell production, but also dry weather in California, the end of the rains, purely a sign of the inactive phase of the MJO. The expectation is when the active phase of the MJO, now how it works is when the MJO, California would be 120, so roughly in here, when the active phase of the MJO gets somewhere approaching the U.S. West Coast, storm production should really ramp up. Maybe not so much as it starts moving into the West Pacific, but sometimes even there, because it will actually start enhancing the jet and allowing the jet to go push further south and into California, and then you get the storm events. Anyway, so right now, inactive phase in control, easterly anomalies over the Kelvin wave generation area. This is all expected. Let's look at the forecast. So we look at for zonal wind anomalies up at 850 millibars. This is a good proxy for what's going on down at the surface. And with zonal wind anomalies, it's the east-west component of the wind. We don't care about the north-south. Is it blowing harder from the east or harder from the west in the Kelvin wave generation area? This is the date line right here running down the chart. Dates here, so we're looking back in history. Kelvin wave generation area, basically just this side of these two ticks, so between here. And you can see since February, inactive phase of the MJOs, blues, purples are easterly anomalies, and it's been going on for a while. Here's today's date. Strong easterly anomalies have been, really right in here in control, and the forecast has them continuing through, the next 5 days, and then things start lightening up. And you can see that easterly anomalies have been occurring since about February 22nd. So it's this inactive phase of the MJO has been running almost a month, or forecast to run almost a month, which is pretty long, but it was a pretty strong push. And that's about normal for normal to a little bit longer than normal for an inactive phase of the MJO. Next, we look at forecast charts for the MJO. There's multiple charts. They sometimes differ a little bit, but it gives us a sense of, one, when the active phase is going to show up, and two, whether it's going to start imparting energy to the jet, which three, of course, leads us to, well, that's maybe when we'll start getting storms and surf, and also maybe more snow or rain relative to California. So right now, this is outgoing long-wave radiation charts. We've been through this before. Higher numbers, yellows and oranges, suggest more sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, which, of course, means high pressure and the inactive phase of the MJO. But notice from past, last week and the week before, things looking much weaker. here, and by about a week out, the inactive phase is to fade, the active phase is to make its way into the West Pacific, and then be pretty weak, though, 2 weeks out. This per the statistic model. The GEFS ensemble model suggests a different pattern. This is a little bit of a head-scratcher because it says the inactive phase is to be gone in about 5 days, but then is to reappear and go for out for 2 weeks. We find that somewhat unlikely. Phase diagram charts, we've been through this before too. This is assume you're looking down on the North Pole. The active phase, or any phase of the MJO, runs from west to east from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent. Consider that Bali. Over the dateline, West Pacific. Now this is all on the equator, mind you. South of the United States, into the Atlantic Ocean, above Africa, and then back to the Indian Ocean. Typical cycle right there. The heavy dots where the active phase is. So in the East Indian Ocean, the forecast, if you're inside the circle, considered to be exceedingly weak. The active phase is basically supposed to be weak and non-existent for the 2 weeks, for the next 2 weeks. This per the ECMF model. The GEFS model says much the same, but that the active phase is to reemerge in the Indian Ocean, and that's why in the previous chart it showed some active phase redeveloping, like, in the Indian Ocean. We're not sure if we believe that. That's one model of many. The upper level picture, the greens, consider that. This is potential for precipitation, but consider it the active phase of the MJO. This runs about a week or two, probably closer to 2 weeks ahead of normal. It suggests the active phase of the MJO here in the West Pacific. There's New Guinea, Bali, maritime continent, South America there. So this shows the inactive phase as of today working its way through the East Pacific, active phase in the West Pacific, and you can just see it traversing across the Pacific, active phase. So it'll start getting good probably. According to this, March 17th, add a week or so to that, so probably the 24th, 25th, something like that, and making its way across the Pacific into, the 6th of April. The interesting part relative for max rain for California would be when it's south of California here on the equator, so right about here, the 27th, we'll add probably, so we'll say early April, or the first week or two in April, max rains relative to this active phase, the MJO. Then the inactive phase shows up again, does its traverse over a couple of weeks, starting according to this, early April, and making it into Central America by mid-April, and add about 2 weeks to that. And then finally, the CFS model, this long-range model. Again, 850 millibar winds up about 4,000 feet. Now, this chart's a little bit reversed, and the date line, here, we'll pull this down here. Date line runs right there. So the area we're looking at is right in between here, the Kelvin wave generation area. Blues are easterly anomalies. We see that to be the case right now. It looks like they're to run for about another week. And I wonder why. Because here, the dotted contours are the inactive phase of the MJO. Exiting the dateline region, let's say about the 18th or so of March. Active phase of the MJO working its way to the west. A little bit of westerly anomalies forecast, but really mainly just suppressing easterly anomalies. Still, the atmosphere thinks La Niña is in control, even though we know that that is not the case. The model forecasts, this is interesting again, suggests westerly anomalies building in the Kelvin wave generation area by early to mid-April, and getting stronger as we get into June. Low pass filter tells us right now this is the dotted contours are La Niña. La Niña is supposed to be fading by April 21st, so that's a little over a month out. And then the heavy contours are the area that's favorable for precipitation and wind. Notice here it is over in the Indian Ocean. That's supposed to reverse come late April, and this is supposed to be the start of El Nino. We've been tracking, every time we look at this chart, we look at where the date is when this happens and when this happens here, and the model has continually been slipping a couple of days, so very unsure whether this sort of El Nino-ish sort of situation will evolve, though the models tend to suggest that it is. Exact details still to be determined. So we've talked about the MJO and the atmosphere. Let's look at the ocean, see what's going on, and specifically in regards to La Niña or El Niño, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. We're looking across the equator, 2 degrees north and south, and looking down into the ocean. We're looking at the water temperature profile. We clearly see warm water balled up in the West Pacific. That's attributable. We saw to east trades, strong east trades blowing the whole way across the equator. Just scoops up all the warm water and pushes it off to the west. But we have noticed here the 26-degree isotherm, this is 26 degrees centigrade, has gotten thicker. The distance here is thicker, suggesting that trades are in fact dying in this area, and we've seen that for sure. They're weaker, and in fact there were westerly tendencies a couple of weeks ago in this area, and that allowed some of this warm water to start sloshing back to the east, and that's what it wants to do. It wants to slosh to the east, but the trades keep blowing it, holding it off. But as soon as the trades back off some, boom, a little bit of that water will start working its way off to the east. And that's what we're seeing with the 26-degree isotherm, but the really warm water is still confined here to the West Pacific. Next, we'll take a look, same picture, but anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Yeah, we see it's warm in the West Pacific, but nothing too bad, 1, maybe 2 degrees. The big note here is, yeah, we have this pocket of 1 degree, minus 1 degree anomalies, but there's a path right here for warm water moving its way from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. And when trades have died, a little bit of that warm water seeps across the boundary and starts making it to the east. There's this other chart here that shows it a little bit more clearly. Here's your warm water. Almost a Kelvin wave, but not quite. We'll call it just a stream of warmer than normal water. If this was La Niña, you'd expect to see cold water all here, and we did earlier this year. That's all gone now. We're back to normal, if not warmer than normal. Upper ocean heat anomalies tells much the same picture here. April, May, June of 2016, La Niña moved in, cold water moving from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. This is the upper 300 meters of the ocean. But notice our supposed La Niña started fading pretty quickly by November of last year. It was all but gone. And then here's the warm water making its way across. And what is this? This is little pockets of half a degree above normal. Certainly nothing that one would call El Niño, but you certainly can't call it La Niña either. It's just a return to normal temperatures. In the reality, this was a very short-lived, weak and westward displaced. Notice all the warm water here is 160, 150, basically south of Hawaii. That's as far and as strong as La Niña was, and now we're moving back to a normal regime. This is a good thing. And yet one other way to look at this, sort of beat it to death here, sea level anomalies from the Jason 2 satellite, strip out all the waves, strip out all the wind swells, strip out the tides, and where you see bumps plus 5 centimeters, plus 10 centimeters, plus 15 centimeters above normal, that tells you where warm water is at depth. Warm water at depth, of course, expands and sort of just makes a little bubble on the ocean surface. Likewise, cold water makes a depression. If La Niña was in control, and it was here, we saw negative anomalies in this region, but notice this, in the past 2 weeks, we've now got 0 to 5 centimeter anomalies. This suggests warm water on the equator right here. This is the pretty much classic El Niño signature, but not nearly strong enough and not long enough. So we're just going to say this is a return to normal for now, but we'll monitor it. But let's take a look at surface level temperature anomalies, differences from normal, and you notice clearly a much warmer than normal pattern along Chile, Peru, Ecuador, and even up into Mexico. And these temps here are 2 to almost 4 degrees above normal. So some sort of significant warming is occurring in this area, or has occurred. And we do know that the last active phase of the MJO, when it moved over this region, it kind of stalled. It brought a bunch of rain to California, but what it also did was suppressed trades in this area, and the sun got to heat the ocean and temperatures started rising. Not all this is particularly maybe attributable to that, though. Either way, in the southern hemi. And notice the last El Nino didn't have a large component from the southern hemisphere. It was kind of a westward displaced El Nino, where this is, look at all this, out to 160 west is 4,500 nautical miles from Peru out to here. Slight warming, stronger warming, all in this area. Now, the question is this El Nino? No one knows. Way too early. If it were El Nino, this, especially a strong one, this would be the time when it would happen. But there needs to be a lot more warm water over in the West Pacific to support Kelvin waves moving this way. So for now, we'll just call it a generalized warming. And remember, all this is in what they call the Niño 1.2 region. It's the Niño 3.4 region. Starts at 120 west and goes out to 170. That's the main area for monitoring El Nino. Over here, you get a lot of noise. It'll warm, it'll cool, it'll do all kinds of stuff, and it'll go cycle and, 1 month on, 1 month off. But all this warm water has to be consistently here, has to be caught by the trades, has to start pushing over into the Niño 3.4 region, which it clearly is not now. Notice there is cool water here. If anything, the La Niña footprint is being enhanced. Water is actually cooling here. It was warmer out this way last week. This is not really cool, but just a little bit. And that's all being driven by the inactive phase of the MJO, enhancing trades, causing upwelling, stirring things up a little bit here and cooling the temperatures some. 7-day trend, well, we see, we'll call it a neutral pattern. It was actually cooler here last week along Peru and Chile. It's kind of rebounded to just neutral. There was pockets of cooler water developing here. They've disappeared. Just this one little pocket by the Galapagos and up in here, but that almost doesn't matter. And the warming trend, we see a warming trend, and we're only talking 5 degrees north or south of the equator, so about that far, and so the general warming setting up, that is good news. Then here's the overview picture. You can see it right here, warming off of South America. But this is new. This cooling here, all this was neutral, if not slightly warm last week, from about 168 to 120. A little bit of cooling going on here, again, attributable to the inactive phase of the MJO. This is the core of what is left of La Niña, and it's not even La Niña. It's just a neutral pattern right now. And the expectation is in the next week or two, as the inactive phase of the MJO moves out and moves east, trades here will fade. Kelvin wave generation area is really, where is it? Right here in this box here. Trades will fade, temperatures will warm up, return to normal conditions is expected. And then what's going on in the atmosphere with El Nino, La Nina? Okay, Southern Oscillation Index. We'll look at that. Difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Kind of a raw way of looking at things, but it seems to have held the test of time pretty well. Daily numbers you can look at. Had a pretty good negative spurt here in February. And generally, we got some positive numbers here in early March, but now the index is turning negative again, and just sort of scanning this, you go, it's almost more negative than positive. So current value minus 7.56. Negative values suggest the active phase of the MJO or El Nino if they run long enough. The 30-day running average certainly bears that out. It's down to minus 5.62, which is not super negative, and it certainly isn't suggesting the active phase of the MJO, but it sort of suggests that some sort of pattern is trying to creep in. And then look at this, the 90-day running average is also, it's near neutral, but slightly negative, suggesting La Nina is gone for sure. And maybe, since these numbers are not even the 30-day average isn't being reflected in the 90-day average, suggesting that maybe something is going on in the ocean, and all this is, I would say, is tied to that warming off of South America. So the previous index was surface pressure. This is the ESPI index. Instead of looking at differences in surface pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti, which is probably somewhere around in here, it's difference in absolute precipitation. This is probably actually a more precise way of looking at it. And negative numbers suggest drier in this region, which is suggestive of La Nina. And so the index, minus 90, suggests still dry here. La Niña is still in control of the atmosphere, though we've seen the ocean clearly is not supporting La Niña, and all the other data isn't supporting La Niña, and the inactive phase of the MJO cannot make that big of a dent. But right now, from a rainfall perspective, it's still dry in this region, even though we know water temperatures are warming over here. They haven't made it fully out south of Hawaii, and so still a drier pattern in control, suggesting the atmosphere thinks we're in La Niña still, even though all the other data suggests La Niña is dead. That's not unexpected. It takes 3, 4, maybe 5 months even for the atmosphere to respond in kind. It's just the atmosphere is a very big boat. It takes a long time for it to turn. So even though it's turning, and we're pretty sure that it's turning in all the other indexes, this index is not registering it that way. The previous index, the Southern Oscillation Index, seems to have a better handle on what's going on. This guy will catch up at some point. Oh, and just going back here real quick, the Southern Oscillation Index 30-day average, you can see back January 2 years ago, this was the El Nino push, negative numbers, well negative. You can see the pulses in the MJO. These upward pulses are the inactive phase. The downward pulses are the active phase. The point being, here was our peak of La Nina, October 2016, and we've actually had, in November, a pulse, an active pulse. We had a lot of surf related to that. La Nina came back. But notice now, again, we're on the downward trend. Again, some more evidence just suggesting that La Nina is dead and maybe we're moving somewhere else. And yet, one more bit of data, the forecast for Niño 3.4 region from the CFS model. This is the area for monitoring El Nino. Here was our La Nina, according to the model, basically half a degree below normal. That's one pretty weak La Nina. The current situation as of right here is basically neutral water temperatures. This is water temperatures now we're talking about. And the forecast is temperatures rising. The expectation is probably not going to rise as quick as this model suggests, but somewhere by the time you get into the summer, we should be, what is that, about 0.6 to maybe 0.7 of a degree above normal. El Nino is half a degree above normal for three consecutive month periods. So perhaps by the fall we could be in a very weak El Nino situation. That's per the CFS model. A summary of other models suggests probably not that warm, maybe 0.3 or 0.4 degrees above normal. So we'll see. Either way, no La Nina is forecast. La Nina is effectively dead, and the expectation is a return to normal. So right now we're paying the price. I mean, this winter, surf has had its moments at times, but it's not been a great winter in the Northern Hemisphere. Everyone knows that, and it was expected because La Nina is in control. But as we move into a neutral, if not slightly El Nino-ish regime, come, let's say late fall, let's say October time frame or so, the atmosphere will start sensing that. It'll start picking up, and a return to a normal swell pattern should be in effect. So the reality is we knew we were going to pay the price this winter, and we're paying it for the 2 years of El Nino prior. Now, we suffer a little bit, but at least we got rain, we got snow. That was kind of unexpected and a good thing, though it's not uncommon to have significant snow events in California in the La Nina year after a moderate to strong El Nino, and that's exactly what has happened. And then we'll see what happens come the fall, so all is not lost. And then we want to show you one other thing on our models page. You can pick models. It'll get you over here. You pick the weather model here. You scroll down the page, down here, and here we go. Snow models, the new 240-hour forecast. Now, I know it's very late in the year and probably too late to be of any interest, but it's here just the same. This is a high-res. It's a GFS, so it goes out, and you can see the other snow models. This is, so it's 6-hour increments out 240 hours. Then the others from the NOM model, 3-hour increment only goes out 84 hours, and then 1 hour increments. That only goes out 36 hours, but this one is the new one. We'll show that here. Roll that out. Here we go. And we'll just roll it through. And you can see, here we go. Oops. We'll say starting Wednesday night, precipitation moving into Northern California, not doing a whole lot. But then we continue in, and then here we go, starting Saturday. So we're now just a week out, and there's some suggestions of light snow in the Sierra now. Not a whole lot, and then that fades. And then a building snow pattern come the following Monday, so about a week out. And you can see for yourself, nothing super, but definitely precipitation in the forecast. So for right now, not a whole lot of swell going on. A little pulse of energy moving towards Hawaii. Nothing big. A stronger but not huge swell on the charts starting Wednesday to be generated, arriving in Hawaii sometime after that. So maybe later in the week, some swell for Hawaii and some for the U.S. West Coast. Inactive phase of the MJO and the jet stream forecast to start coming together. Inactive phase fading out, and then maybe a stronger swell pattern after that. We'll say towards the latter part of this month, at least a week out, and then maybe precipitation and more snow for the Sierra. So winter is not over, even though temperatures and walking outside this weekend you'd think it is. One last blast, attributable probably to the this last active phase of the MJO, and then that'll probably start wrapping up winter, and we'll be into a solid spring-like summer type pattern beyond that. So that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.